Just want to remind everyone, thank you, Miranda. I just want to remind everyone, if you can change your name tag, that'll be great. So we could see what organization you're with and what part of the world you're joining us from. So if you want to rename yourself, those are the top 3 little buttons on the right hand of your picture. It would allow us to see everyone that's here in the location. If you can, please turn on your camera. If not, because of connectivity issues, we totally understand. And we can get started with today. So today's session is about your role as a manager, and we will talk about these objectives that I'm going to share with you right now. So we're going to talk today about identifying the core competencies of good managers. Then we're going to talk about how to understand the difference between management and leadership, and examine situational leadership, and how to identify the challenges of remote management, as well as how to understand inclusive management and to establish how to avoid expressing bias. So we'll talk a bit about these topics today. And my colleague Miranda put those in the chat as well. So yesterday we ended our last session talking about the things that a manager does and the roles that they play, right? So we're going to talk today about all the things that we made a good manager. So we talked about they need to be problem solvers, they need to be good decision makers, they need to motivate others, they need to be good communicators, they need to instill trust and integrity in the work. So these are all the characteristics that we discussed that make up a good manager. So most of these were on the list you helped create yesterday, but we're going to continue to go a little deeper, and we're going to talk about leadership and management. When you think about competency areas on the list, do you think of them most as applicable to managers or leaders, or how do these apply to both? So when we're talking about, the conflict resolution, delegation, and motivation, are we thinking this just applies to managers? Show of hands. You could use the little emojis, or you could just raise your hand. Do we think these skills are just for managers? Raise your hand. How many of us think these are just skills for leaders? And how about both? Awesome. Yeah. So this list that I'm showing you now, it has a management side on the left, and then it has a leadership side. So this is how we'll identify some of the differences as you look through these characteristics. Think about, to what extent is your job more on the left side than the right side, right? So nowadays, we need to develop the skills to move between both. So we need to be able to be good administrators, to focus on systems, how to have an eye on the bottom line, right? How to be more effective, more efficient. But then we also need to know how to motivate, how to have people stay focused, how to build trust in these teams, how to handle challenging situations. So we need to have both, and we need to be able to quickly move between managing a situation and leading a situation, managing a staff person, leading a staff person. So leadership is about having a vision to guide change by thinking ahead, motivating others, and making challenges an opportunity for change. Management focus on achieving the organizational goals through the procedures, the budgets, the staffing, our technical expertise, just hitting the bottom line. So that's why we have to know how to do both. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to take a moment to do now, and this is on your manuals, is the SWOT analysis. So we're going to look at page 10 of your workbook, and we're going to take about 5 minutes to do a little bit of a SWOT analysis for yourself. So we're going to look at the competencies descriptions in your workbook and complete the SWOT analysis. So what are your strengths? What are your, I don't like the word weaknesses, what are your areas of improvement? What are opportunities for growth and learning that you're interested in? And what are some threats? What are some reasons why you may not be able to achieve this, right? So we're going to use this to plan some of the things that we've been thinking about but haven't had the time of where we want to ourselves grow or improve or master some of our skills. So this is page 10 of your workbook. We're going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to put that in a timer, and just go ahead and you could turn off your camera so while we complete this so that you can have some time to reflect. Again, 5 minutes, it's not long enough, but at least we're going to get you into that habit of carving out this time to think about you and what you want to do. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And this is on page 10 of your manual. And we will put, I'll put my timer. So feel free to turn off your camera and look at page 10 of your manual. Okay, put my timer on now. How was that, first one, folks? Anybody want to share your initial reaction to this exercise? Do you do this often? Do you not do this enough? Was there anything new or interesting that you found out about yourself?
I can go if you'd like.
Go ahead, Rob.
I think one of the things I just personally struggle with is conflict resolution. I'm fundamentally conflict averse. So I try to smooth it over rather than resolve things. And that often just makes it fester and makes it worse ultimately in the end. And that's something I struggle with as a manager.
Perfect. And are there things that, or areas where you identified also where how that could help, or how you can practice more or build that skill up?
Well, I'd like to acquire some skills to be better at conflict resolution. And knowing when sometimes it is helpful to just sort of smooth things over in the moment, but then you need to circle back and maybe privately address something with someone. But time goes by and you're on to the next thing, and you've sort of, it's in the rearview mirror and you think, okay, well, it's over, but it isn't really, because it often will come back.
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about that conflict resolution, or just addressing these uncomfortable situations or where there is an issue with a staff person. So we'll definitely be talking about that, and timing, Rob, is really of essence. So I'm glad you said that, because it might not be that moment, but we do have to address it within an adequate amount of time when the incident happened, so that we can really grow and see why the person did what they did or reacted the way they did. So we'll definitely talk about that. Awesome. So, I mean, at the core of this exercise is also a great tool for you to start conversations with yourself and also with your manager or with your team about areas where you want to grow or focus on as a team, or think about where you can delegate some things, come off your plate. So depending on where you're trying to go as well, this is a great starting tool. Also to help you set your goals, your own professional development goals. I think it's very important, right? You can also use this tool with your teams to have them see where they're at, where are their areas that they also want to grow and improve. So definitely feel free to use this with your team as well. But this will also help you start thinking of where you are as an individual, as a manager, as we talk about situational leadership and how to set good remote working habits, how to have this balance that we're trying to have, and how to also address and prevent some bias. So we'll come back to this whole situational leadership, but it's good to start where you to know where you are as we start this transition or journey into situational leadership and you as a manager. Okay. So I am going to share my screen again. So I am going to introduce to you, some of you may have seen this before, but this is a situational leadership model. It's by Hershey and Blanchard, and it's situational leadership. And what it tells us is that at the core, people want to feel seen, right? So many of the qualities that you raised about a good manager get at this core of having different skill sets, knowing when to apply them, and knowing what situation warrants what type of skill from you, what type of staff person or team member requires a certain level of guidance or mentorship or leadership from you. So the answer to the question, how do I manage this person? It depends, right? There's no one size fits all to this management style. So you need to know your team. You need to know your people. So at the key of the theory, it depends on management and leadership approach, was developed in the 1970s. And the core premise of this model is that managers and leaders need to adapt their leadership style to an individual and a situation. So like all good management models, there's a base, which is a box at the bottom. And along the x-axis is low to high directive behavior. So how much direction you as a manager need to give an individual you're working with. Keep in mind that this is not only dependent on the person, but also the task that they're performing. So if they're new to doing this task, obviously you might give them a lot of direction versus delegating, right? So some tasks with some individuals may need a lot of direction, while other tasks with the same individual may need less direction. And then along the y-axis is low to high supportive behavior. How much do you need to support that individual in a socio-emotional way? Do they have the confidence to deliver the task you've assigned to them? Do they have the willingness to deliver the task? Are they in, right, to want to do this job? And do you need to help them to get access to other resources, other staff people in the organization to deliver? So just like with directive behavior, it all depends on the task and the situation as an individual. So pretty much the whole point is that we're going to move through this curve from delegating to supporting to coaching to directing. And depending on the person, depending on the task, we are going to be moving through this as managers, right? We can also move ourselves through this depending if we're learning a new task or skill, we're working on a new project, and also our team. The team as a whole can move through this curve, okay? We can plot a staff member's journey with their role for any given task that goes from high direct behavior through a less directive and more supportive task, right? So going through the high support, low direction, all the way through low direction, high support. So we can clearly see in the bottom right-hand square that there's a high directive and low supported behavior. So you're directing, sometimes referred to as telling someone what to do, right? Go ahead and finish these reports for me. You don't have to give them the how, the where to get the reports. They already know. You're just telling them where to go and get their stuff. In the top right hand box, we're doing a little bit more coaching, helping them understand the why, the how this work is going to be important, or it drives up to your goals or the goals of the organization, right? And on the top left, we're lowering the amount of direction we are giving, but we're maintaining high support level with the working in confidence. I can't wait to see what you're going to deliver. I can't wait to hear your ideas. So we're like just being that cheerleader for them. And the last box, where you're doing very low support and very low directing, is where you can delegate tasks freely, right? That's where you're just saying, hey, this is, you put something that is on your to-do list and you can delegate to this person because they have the willingness, the skill set, and the time to do this work. So you're able to just delegate and have them take the lead on something on their own and just report back to you or let you know if they need your support. Okay. So think about where you fit in this role. Consider what it will depend on what you're doing. Some tasks, some roles are in one place, and some tasks for other folks are in different places. So see where each steps person is and meet them where they are. Okay. So now we're going to do a little plotting. We're going to do a little annotate. Remember, on the top, do view options and then annotate. So I want you to think about an area, a situation that you might be having with a staff member that you're trying to coach to do something, or you're trying to give them a new task, and plot where that employee and where that situation is in this situational leadership chart. So there's one task that either you yourself are working on or you're working with a staff member, and where are you in this? for some reason annotate is an issue, we don't want technology to be a problem, just put it in the chat. Supporting, coaching, delegating, directing. And also there's little stamps under annotate. You could put in text, or you could do a stamp and put a little star, check mark, X. Awesome. It's a lot of coaching and delegating. I'm sorry, then directing. Some of us haven't gotten to the delegation piece. Awesome. All right, so a lot of coaching. Great. So keep this model in mind. We're going to come back to it when we also talk about teams. But I just want you to also just remember, again, and we all do this sometimes naturally, but now we know the name that there's a model, right, that does this. But we normally do this with folks. We know where we try to gauge where they're at and how much support we can give them. Sometimes we may be busy and we don't give them enough, but it's just knowing that not everyone is going to need to be managed or led the same way. So we have to understand that there's this line or trajectory that everyone moves to and the task that we assign them move to. So if you want to have a little bit more of that reflection time about this model, on page 13 of your workbook, you know, the model's there and there's some question, there's like about a question or two if you want to have more time to reflect on it. Also, my colleague Marinda put a link to a document that talks a little bit more about situational leadership on the chat, but definitely it's something we will be coming back to throughout the session. So the idea of situational leadership, I'm going to clear this out real quick so I can move through my slides. Am I annotating? There we go. So the idea of situational leadership shows us how important it is to understand where each individual is in the journey and to understand members of your team. And this can be even more challenging in a remote environment. And it is more difficult to see people struggle. It's hard to ask for help. And there's no one around, you know, to call. You won't be able to sometimes walk into an office and see someone with the door closed or notice that they're coming, you know, late to meetings or late to the office. So some of us are returning into this hybrid model and we may get some of that, but now we're not all in the same place at the same time, even when we are back in the office. So how do you take this time to really understand when someone might need some support? So again, some of us went from working with our colleagues in person to now being remote completely at 100%. Some of our hubs even we no longer have hubs or going back into this model. So how are we adjusting to this? So in the chat, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment. In the chat, I want to hear from you. I want to hear on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I love it and 1 being I hate it. How do you feel about working remote? Oh, 8. Awesome. Sometimes it depends on the day and I get it. So don't worry if yours is lower than an 8. All right. And your so-so depends. Yeah, totally get it. A 2. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to work from home. Awesome. So now I want you to think about, what does your staff um, need from you now that is different from before? For those of you that transition from in-person to virtual or remote, or went from hybrid. So think about how you feel about it. And now think about what your staff may need from you, or what you're seeing staff need from you more now than before.
So do we like
You
join
can
in the
talk about it.
conversation, or how does
Yes,
this work?
please. No, you can
Okay.
respond on the chat or open your mic.
Okay, so now basically, after the COVID and all of this self-discovery of, people have been working from home, looking into where they are personally more interested and in what. After coming back, I have found that there are a lot of people on my staff who are required to submit certain deliverables, but they're putting their nose in other people's business simply because they think they're more interested in that. And this is like taking a lot of effort. One of our colleagues was saying, like, he needs to learn how to deal with these confrontations. This is becoming time consuming. It's like, yeah, but my work is boring. We've been locked up for 2 years. I think I want to be more involved in, yeah, but that's somebody else's job, and that's what they were hired to do. It's not about you wanting to do this, or this is more interesting and this is more exciting. Your role is more research. There's not much field in it. So all of this is like, it's becoming time consuming. It's like, it's taking up a lot of your time. It's taking up a lot of your energy. There's a lot of one-on-one involved. Try convincing these people that this is not their role. This is not their job. This is not what they were hired to do. And at the same time, you have to be compassionate. You have to be empathetic, and you have to take into consideration their needs, their psychological. This has become like, horrible at some point in time, especially if you manage smaller teams. It gets even more strenuous, and it really stresses you out. When you have bigger teams and you have to manage lots of people, only deal with managers, it's a bit more easy on you when you're on top of an organization. Is anybody else facing this?
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, this is the time where they're calling it the time of reevaluation and awakening and reprioritizing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with people wanting to go hiking and go to the mountains and discover nature on their time. Okay, fine. But like, if you're hired to give like legal advice, it's none of your business to go on field trips and do assessment of export readiness for companies.
Yeah, no, so I get you, Rahad. And Amber, I think, agrees with you. The psychological needs part is also tough, spending a lot of time feeling like I need to be a better pseudo therapist for my team, being more intentional and being available. Yeah. Angela, go ahead, Rob, and then Angela.
So I found that particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, when people were trapped at home, they didn't have other activities that would interfere or push back against their work lives. Work just became everything for them. And then they turned to work for all of their needs, and I spent a huge amount of time doing just basic pastoral care for people. Just kind of being emotionally available, because no one, a lot of my colleagues are young single people living alone in apartments or in apartment shares where they didn't have a lot of privacy and really struggling. That's gotten a little bit better, but they've now come to expect it as part of my role. And so kind of setting up the boundaries as to, what is appropriate to discuss with your manager or the boss of the organization, and what should you really be talking about with a therapist? or, and pointing them in the direction. And we have lots of resources for people to access what they need for psychological and emotional support. But, but making it clear that they need to have a bigger aperture on their world than just work. And that's been it's gotten a lot better. I mean, I would say in the last 6 months, it's improved dramatically, but it's still there, that the organization has become everything for their lives. And that's not healthy for them. And it's certainly not good for the organization either.
That's a great point, Rob. And I would say, do share if your organization has those resources like employee assistance programs or other additional mental health services, or even like the Calm app. A lot of organizations went to apps to allow them to meditate and to breathing exercises, or just allow for this flexibility to go to an appointment and things like that. It's really helpful for you to share those resources and redirect them, because there is that fine line of, providing support and being empathetic and just saying, how do I help you make adjustments or to your schedule, or, approve leave, whatever you need for those mental health days. But then there's that line that we're not therapists, right? So some of you in this room may be actual therapists or counselors, and that's amazing, but most of us are not official therapists or counselors. So there is that line where we want them to get the proper help and support. So if you do have those resources, maybe have a refresher as an organization and say, hey, don't forget we have these things. Don't forget to take sick time. Don't forget to take vacation, and, hone in on yourself and those mental health days, because those are important. That's the reality of the stuff that we're in. So I'm going to go to Angela. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm going to go to Angela real quick.
I was just going to say also, Rob, I keep trying to encourage my employee to find work friends, because, there's like the manager, therapist, but sometimes you just need a work friend to complain to. And I'm like, anyway, so, but the other thing I was going to say to add on to your employee saying, I don't want to do this thing, it's boring, is I am sort of like, yeah, you were sort of hired for that though. I don't really know what to tell you, but I also keep being nervous because it's a terrible time to hire. So I'm nervous about losing her and then having no one to do it. And so I'm struggling with that balance of, well, I need you to do these things. Do I need to be sort of sweetening the pot so that you're willing to go take notes at this meeting? So I'm struggling with that a little bit.
And that's a great point. Rahad, did you want to say anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay. No, and let me tell you, even before
I was about to say something very harsh, so I just upped it against
no,
it.
that's okay. No, that's fine. So look, I experienced the same thing even before the pandemic, right? People get into the job, or they realize that there's other more interesting work to them in the organization. So how do you balance it out? So one of the things we did is, if the staff person, we would speak to the supervisor. If the staff person showed interest in another area, but they were able to complete the tasks and it didn't interrupt with their course, tasks that they were hired to do, we would allow them from time to time to sit in meetings, attend meetings regarding a specific topic or field as part of their professional development. But we were always very upfront and saying, look, this is the job you were hired to do. We understand that now you know all the other work that we do that might be, more interesting, but you could definitely grow and develop into those areas. But at this point, we need you to also focus on your work. We're going to create opportunities for you. Sometimes you will be able to attend and sometimes you won't. That's just the reality. So look at it from a professional development perspective. And if it continues to be an issue, I've also had conversations with staff where I'm like, then we may, you need to evaluate yourself where you're at, where you want to go, because this may not be the place, or this is not the job, right? This is the job that we have right now. We don't have an opening anywhere else. So we understand. So you can eventually grow into that, or you can just decide that this may not be where you want to be. And that's okay, because you don't want those band-aids to stay on, because again, it's just brushing it under the carpet, and then they'll come back later and give you like a 2-day notice that they're leaving, and you're still, in a bind. Or they realize that you're working with them for something to their development. But it's all timing, right? And this is why we also ask for people to self-reflect and evaluate. And we as managers should not be afraid to lose someone, because it also creates issues when someone that doesn't want to be there stays in an organization. It really does.
Okay, so I have another one for you. How about all of those online courses that were all over the place, the Harvard free courses and all of that. And then all of a sudden you have a workforce that's coming back to work saying, okay, yeah, well, when I was here before the COVID, this is what I used to do. And these were my skills. But now I have a certificate and like maybe 3 or 4 new competencies. And I don't want to do this. I want to be more involved in 1, 2, or 3, whereby you have other people doing that job. This is also creating havoc.
Yeah. So same thing, right? Just because sometimes people get degrees or, you know, they go back to school doesn't mean there is a job available in the organization to do that job. And
or
that's
that they
the
have
reality.
the experience.
Exactly. Or that they have the experience. So first of all, you always, when you're talking about promotions, when you're talking about people wanting to expand to other areas, first of all, is what is the need of the organization? Is there such position available? And then are they the right fit? Do they have the skills? Do they have the background? Do they have the experience? So if you lead with that, what does the organization need and what is available, whether you're doing promotions or people's interests want to spike into other sectors of the organizational work, then that's where you have always to fall on, right? There is no opening right now for this. There is no availability. And if this is something that you're interested, I totally understand. We can think about it as something opens up, but right now this is not what's available. So it's that balance, and also having a reality check, right? I mean, this is what it is. And just like we have a choice to hire someone, they have a choice to accept and see if we're a fit for them as well as an organization. So don't shy away from that. It's very helpful to just have those honest conversations, right? Because you don't want someone that's not happy with the work to stay also, because that also could be a problem. So Satalia, I just want to add, it's important to recognize passion and think about mentorship in order to help people grow. Exactly. If we look at it from a professional development standpoint, it could be helpful. They'll feel like they're seen, they're heard, and their interests are also being kept in mind. But if we don't have a position for them to grow into or open at the moment, there's nothing that they can grow into. But we can work with them in the future. And then they'll need to decide, is that enough for them right now? Or do they want to be in this work? Then they might need to find another organization that has that available. But always try to grow and provide some professional development if it's possible. Okay, it's a balance. Rob, I like that. It's not a failure if someone leaves because they find a better opportunity at another organization that you can't provide. 100%. 100%. And we shouldn't feel bad about it, right?
We shouldn't feel bad. They often do feel bad because they want to stay where they are. And it's, you're right. You just got to be completely transparent and say, you know, God love you. You've gone out and you've developed all these great skills. They're wonderful skills. We've helped you develop them, but we don't have a place for you to move up. And if moving up is really important for you, and it should be, you should put your career first. And we want to help you put your career first. If that means you go somewhere else, we'll be sad about that, but we'll be happy for you. And we want to support you as an individual in your professional development. And if we can't provide that opportunity here, it's perfectly fine for you to go there. You know, Angela's point about recruiting people is well taken. It's not easy to find people. And so I'm finding that I'm trying very hard to create as much give, but there are limits. You know, we don't exist to employ people. We employ people in order to get a job done. And flipping that, sometimes I find the people I supervise don't kind of understand that. I've had employees tell me this organization exists to employ people, and I said, actually, that's not true. We exist for very other reasons, and you're welcome to join us in achieving that mission. But if we can't provide a career path for you because we're too small, and we are small, you know, we wish you the best of luck wherever you think you can be happier.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a balance, and I'm appreciating this conversation because I don't think we talk enough about the potential of having these honest conversations with our staff. You know, we don't want them to leave. I think they'll be great, but at the same time, we gotta see where they're at, and wherever we can motivate and without, you know, exceeding our line of flexibility as an organization and not getting the work done or having to hire someone else now because we're trying to be super flexible for other folks. As long as we don't have to go that far, but we're able to provide some professional development, some mentorship, anything that can keep them motivated, and seeing that we're trying to accommodate as much as we can, but there's still a job to do, then it's up to them to decide if that's enough. But we can only do so much as an organization. And those are the realities, right? But the whole thing also with the remote aspect of it is, and some of you put it on here, is the intentional connection. How do we connect with folks? How do we make sure they stay engaged? They have the resources they need. They stay motivated themselves, right? Because sometimes working alone, some people don't like to just be by themselves in a part of their house, you know? And how do you continue to engage with them?
How is that your fault, or how is that like your responsibility? They studied for so long to get those skills, okay, to apply for that position, and then all of a sudden they don't want to do that. They want to do something else.
Oh, well, they might just have be a moment of reflection. Like we were saying here, I think they just might need a moment of reflection to say, am I at the right place? Is this the right job? Because you can only do so much to create that flexibility.
But is it your job to make sure that they are happy all the time?
No,
it's not. Like,
I mean, no, it's no one's job for anyone to be happy. Everyone's responsible for their own happiness.
So you cannot cater for, and I think people are exceeding the line these days. It's like, I'm not happy doing this. I would rather do that, which is somebody else's job, okay? And I need time off because I'm psychologically stressed out. Well, so am I. And then it's like, we need to do more activities. We need to have more excursions. We need to go, we need retreats. We need this and we need that. So where is the line that, you know, that separates what their idea of what should be done and what is the organization and the management's responsibility towards their people? I mean, maybe you have somebody that you pray every night, I hope he or she or they would submit their resignation tomorrow morning.
Well, that's scary.
And they're not doing this.
Yeah.
And they're not doing this, but they're continuing to bitch day in and day out, which is like, you know, it's not good for the morale. It's not good for their peers. It's not good for the management. And I'm sure it's not good for them because it means they're not in a good place.
Right. So this is where, if you as an organization already have some like employee assistance programs, you have an HR department, you have someone that you can redirect them for some services. If you see a behavior like that or a pattern, right? Someone not engaging, something as simple as not every meeting not being on video, showing up late. If there's some type of pattern, having the conversation is, how are you doing? How's it going? Do you need some assistance in your schedule change so that you're no longer late? Do you need to, do you need some time off? Allow some time for reflection, and then having those honest conversations, right? Because you can't change someone if they're not ready and willing to do a job that you have. And you have to just remind them, this is the job at hand, right? So it's a balance. But the biggest thing where I'm coming up with this is making sure that when we are remote, having the resources, having the structure to be able to provide for them to be able to do their job, right? If you went remote, do you have all your files online? Can people get access to this information? Do you have the software or the mechanism where you can have rapid response conversations, where you can have the technology to really carry out meetings and continue to communicate? So where's it? That's a good point regarding balance wants versus needs, and trying to nurture wants will also emphasize needs. I think communicating clearly what the job is up front, what is required, but recognizing what they want to do, 100%. And Rob says, it sounds like a situation where an intervention from HR would be helpful. Yeah, 100%. Rahat, if you're wishing for someone to turn in their resignation, you need to look at where's that line of like if it has escalated to a performance issue and an HR issue where you need to have other type of steps, disciplinary actions, a performance improvement plan or something for that employee. And it's a good conversation with your HR team. But acknowledging that remote management has many benefits. You're not restricted to a geographical location. A lot of people have been moving and moving across because they can still work for an organization. People don't have to travel and commute in for work as much anymore. We're not restricted by the time zone, or at least distractions, which can allow you to get more work done. So it allows for some flexibility, but it also sometimes blurs our boundaries and our lines of our personal life and our work time, right? Because now we can work anytime in the day. So what does it mean as a manager? You might need to approach a little different on how you make an intentional connection with your staff. If you're not having check-in meetings to see how progress is going on certain jobs or the certain work that they need to be doing, making sure you're available so that you are following up, you are assessing of how the work is going, right? And if there's something happening in their life that might need some adjustments, or their schedule might need to be adjusted, or they might need to take leave for a certain period of time. So so Humentum worked with some of the member organizations on some feedback about how to best work together remotely. And we put together some lists, and we're going to spend a little time today exploring how we need to contextualize these competencies and skills to a remote environment. And what habits can we start to form to make them stick? So you have to have been working. So we've all been working remote for a long time now. So or some of us are in hybrid. So some will be permanently virtual. So this is a great exercise to reflect on how it's going. What systems do you need? How is the communication going? How are teams still connecting and staying engaged and connected? So I'm going to share with you. So we're going to get into groups for about 12 minutes, and we're going to use a Google document where you're going to be put into groups. There's going to be a digital proficiency group. There's going to be a meeting deliverables group. There's going to be a communications and culture group. And what you're going to do together is you're going to discuss and record your key points about how to make some of these themes into action points. So I'm going to share my screen real quick so that we can look at this. And Miranda's also going to share the Google link. Thank you so much. So this is the document. So these are some of the remote work competencies and skills that we've gotten from some of our partner organizations at Humentum. So, and they've broken it down into 3 categories. Digital proficiency, like do you have the technology necessary to carry out the work? Virtual facilitation of meetings, standardizing, digitizing procedures, filing systems. So then we've also broken it down into meeting deliverables, project management, how is that working? Building new relationships, self-motivation of staff, or motivating your teams now in this remote work environment. And the third one is communication and culture, right? As an organization, what are some shifts that you're making as you're carrying out some tasks or some things that you want to do with this remote work environment? How are you still creating those connections that you had in person, right? Where you were able to see these cues about someone needing help, or just someone not being engaged. So what are we doing there? So each of you are going to be put into groups. And if you see it here at the bottom, there's digital proficiency 1. Then the green ones are digital proficiency. The blue ones are deliverables. And then the yellow ones are communications and culture. So what we're going to ask you to do is on the left, these are the priorities. So in your environment, what are some of the ways that these competencies look different in your remote work environment? And what are some habits that you can create with your team or your organization to model this new desired priority and behavior? All right. So we already maybe have some of these already in place in our organization, or maybe we're lacking some resources. So let's think about all these in these 3 categories. So we're going to have 12 minutes. And Miranda's going to put you into groups and name one person from each group. So when you go into this Google Doc, you'll know which group to slide to go under. Only one person needs to take notes. Not everyone needs to. So if there's some technology issues, we can work around that. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you. Any questions before we break out? Yes, you can write on the slides. You could definitely make edits. Oh, are you
I
not
think
able
now
to
you
edit?
can't on those slides.
You can't? No.
But I just copy and paste it over.
Hold on. I am sorry for that. Okay, I know how to fix this. Give me 1 second. This is
Edit
like-
access.
Okay, you were able to change it, Miranda?
No, I can't because I'm not the owner.
So this is what we're gonna do. Give me 1 second. Hold on. We can make this work. Bear with me just 1 second. Getting your backup plan here. Okay. I'm gonna give you another link. Give me 1 second. Alrighty then. I'm going to give you a new link on the chat. So this is the Google Doc that you can access. Perfect. We are going to have 10 minutes. Sorry, I said 12 minutes, right, Miranda?
Yeah, you did.
Perfect. 12 minutes. And then Miranda's going to put you into groups. So Miranda, can you give us the name of one person per group?
So there's going to be 4 groups. So the DG1 group will be Cindy Rosales group. Cindy
And they
Victoria.
start on slide 6, by the way. Your section starts on slide 6.
You are DG1. Then deliverable 1, room 2 is Amber and Rob's group.
And that's like 9.
Okay, and then comms 1 would be Daniela and Moses and Trent's group.
And that's like 12.
And then room 4 is DG2, and that would be Angela's group. Obviously, I haven't read all the names.
And that's slide 7.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you in 12 minutes.
We'll open the rooms. There you go.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I know some of you are still looking, you look like you're in like middle of thoughts here, so which is great. I saw something. So this is great. So this model, I just wanted to say this tool is based on the Neuro Leadership Institute, where they base it on 3 components: behavior change, priorities, and habits, and with systems. So this is something that, you know, the team or the organization have to agree on their priorities or the work on creating change, then building the right habits and having the systems that support the right habits and priorities. And something as simple as, I saw someone typed it, and some organizations that we're working with are going through the same thing, just time zones. Remembering that some of our folks are in different time zones. So when we're having these meetings, you know, it might be middle of the night, it might be early, you know, middle of the early morning for some folks, and just reshifting sometimes the meeting times, even 2 years into COVID, right? Or post-COVID, where we're at a meeting time zone thing still escapes us. So something as simple as that. And then that's very intricate as having really good communication systems and technology for meetings and workshops. And what does this look like now when most of us are going to either be hybrid or 100% remote, right? So I would like to hear any thoughts, anything that jumps out that you want to share about your group or session. Oh, Rini, 3 a.m. in New Zealand. Oh my goodness gracious. You're brave. You really wanted to be here, so I appreciate you. I could not do 3 a.m. Okay, maybe 5. Angela, thank you so much.
Always ready to talk.
I love
So
it.
we had some interesting discussions. So virtual facilitation for meetings and presentations, and then we talked about proficiency in digital tools. And one of the things that I think is difficult, but that people have tried to work on, is making meetings more engaging. I actually had just done a training before this one, and it was 3 hours of people just talking at us. And it's so hard to do that versus here getting put into breakout rooms, all that sort of stuff. So that's been a shift for people, and something important to focus on and work on. And then we also had an interesting difference about whether or not people required that people's cameras to be turned on. So we had one person in our group who they require it to be on, they record the calls, they take attendance, and then for other folks, they don't do that, and cameras don't have to be on. So we thought that was really interesting. And then the last thing I'll say is the pandemic forced people to become better at digital things. So people weren't using SharePoint before. Now you have to use SharePoint. So that's sort of been a good thing. So
Yeah, that's a good point, because some organizations were already like in this hybrid, or were in different places throughout the world, so they had some level of infrastructure to be remote, but some organizations didn't, and they were like, overnight now you have to be a remote type of organization. So what does that mean? Even your files and the way you share information had to be rethought about, but still that takes time, right? So 2 years, almost 3 years after, and we're still not having, some organizations still don't have the adequate systems or support to be in this remote or hybrid environment. So this is what I wanted to spark, these conversations about technology or the resources or the way we engage with our groups in a remote setting, because it's something that you really need to reflect, not only at the organizational level, but within your team and you as a manager, right? Being more intentional with your connections. So sometimes, again, we get so focused on the tasks and the works we have to do, so sometimes we're not as engaging in an informal way to get to know our staff and to see what motivates them, how do we work together, how do you need to approach them. So it's good to have intentional connection, and also informal at times. Not everything has to be a very structured meeting, but carving out during a meeting some informal conversations and talking. Something simple as in one of our meetings, we used to have the last question, we would take turns. We would just ask something simple like, what are you doing this summer? Or if the holidays are coming up, or does anybody have any trips coming up? Or, you know, who's going to be celebrating something big, just so that we can start building that cohesiveness and that team environment, but on a personal level. Again, we're not trying to be BFFs or best friends forever with everyone we work with, but there has to be some level of respect and understanding, so we understand where people are coming from, where we can work with them, some areas of improvement, or just come together as a team, right? So it's just carving out the time is really important. You could definitely have access to this Google link, go in to see what other groups put in under their category. Continue to use this as a thinking tool for your organization as well, and see what needs to what changes you can have or conversations you can have at the organization level and also at your team level. Okay, so I wanted to also shift gears a little bit, and as we're talking about being inclusive from a work remote setting and systems and communication, let's also look about talk about being an inclusive manager and understanding bias, right? So I just want you to drop in the chat, or feel free to open your mic. What is your definition, or what do you think unconscious bias is? You can drop it on the chat, or you could open your mic, whatever you feel comfortable with. Assumptions, stereotypes we hold that we may not be aware of. Yes. a belief that you hold that you don't realize that you hold, and it causes you to treat people differently. Yes. Yeah, it's assumptions, right? Either through our experiences or cultural or whatever it may be that creates some type of bias or labeling, if we will, about a person, a group, an organization, a business, whatever it may be, right? So when unconscious bias is not addressed, it affects the morale and the overall experience of the workers, of the whole team and organization. So the team may end up feeling alienated and also be less likely to make their ideas heard. So why is being considered of these differences still such a challenge in the 21st century? And that's because we're still dealing with inherent stereotypes of bias. So passing comments can stick in our minds. We grew up labeling things, right, as kids to help us understand how to process this world, what's a color, what's, inside, outside, all these different things, which are important to us as a child to deal with in the world and not feel overwhelmed. But it is how the media and even our own nurturing creates those definitions for us and continues through our lives, and then creates these biases later. So as a manager, the opposite of being inclusive is also being dismissive. So we use our stereotypes, our biases, to be dismissive of people, and in some ways use it as a way to execute both our reactions and their contributions. And this limits, and this is not limited to those who are different from us. Women have biases against other women. Those of one ethnic group can share some biases of the same ethnic group. I mean, it just happens throughout, right? And it is hard to rewire. So we need to remember that. So it takes very conscious understanding and awareness, but it's important to bring the unconscious to the conscious. So how can we make ourselves aware when biases might be at play, and make a conscious effort and habit to address it, right? There are week-long trainings on bias and how to address it and how to implement some of these policies and structures in organizations. So this is just to help us recognize that there are bias in organizations, or that we as people have bias.
بطل.
Executive manager, where our director, who was a woman, did not want to approve folks to work remote. Anyone that had small children was not approved to work remote. So you would think, right? She's a woman, she's a mother, she's a grandmother, you would understand or not have this type of bias. But she felt, with no proof whatsoever, that people that were asking to work remotely from home that had small children were just doing it because of childcare needs. And this was pre-COVID. This is where, like, working remote was like a new thing, and you had to, earn it and show that you were stable to do your work. But people were afraid to even request time off. And you can see that there was this preferential treatment being given to folks that did not have children, which was mind-blowing, because that didn't mean that you were completing your task or doing what you were supposed to be doing. So it took a lot of coaching and conversations from the executive team and myself to try to make her understand that what she was doing was not right, and also unfounded, right? We had staff that could be in the office and could not be working, but they're just sitting in their desk. That meant nothing. And we have a lot of staff that were working remote that we knew day in and day out, they were delivering, they were doing their work and delivering their products, regardless of whether they had children or not. So it took a lot to then be allowed to expand our work remote policy to everyone and have more of a standard of quality of work and production versus if you had a small child or not, or you were single. That's what she was basing it on before. Yeah, it's very mind-blowing. She was, you wouldn't expect it, but that's what we were dealing with, which then caused a ripple effect. Women that were, becoming pregnant were afraid to share with the organization that they were expecting, because they felt that they were also going to be treated differently, because now they were going to be mothers and were expecting a child, which is mind-blowing, right? You would think an organization led by a woman would be a little more open or understanding to families and children, but that wasn't the case, right? Daniela, did you have a question or thought? I saw you open your mic. Don't want to put you on the spot, but just asking.
No, actually, I think it must have been a mistake, but
No, that's okay. So sometimes bias happen, again, from experiences, whatever the case may be. And when I found out the root of where she was getting this feeling from, it was a generational thing for her. And she had experienced a lot of obstacles as a mother working and being a teacher and not having that flexibility. And that's how she justified her rationale for this bias in the organization. So we really shifted that. We shifted the culture, we shifted the policies to avoid this type of bias to take over in the future, and for also managers to be more equitable when assigning remote work for staff or approving remote work at that time. So it's a total shift, but you cannot be afraid to tackle it, even if it comes from the top of the organization. It's going to be a little harder, you got to be a little more tactful, but it can be done. And it takes some time. It took, honestly, probably almost a little less than a year. It took a lot of time, a lot of building on that personal rapport, because I was also new to the organization. So we built our own personal relationship, and there was a level of trust. And then, I was able to build that relationship and then be able to create that change within the organization. So it's a process. So I just want to let's talk about it in a group. So what are some things that you as a manager and a leader, so a person of power within your organization, your group, your team, that you can have opportunities to be more inclusive? Actually, let me take that back. What are some areas where we can be, when we can show bias? So where we can be inclusive or exclusive of folks within the organization? You can put it on the chat or open your mic. There's some examples there that Marinda put. So some areas where we do have power of being inclusive or exclusive. Provide training opportunities who choose to include in meetings. Yeah, who are we including? Are we including the loud person that always has something to say, or are we excluding them? Are we including the person that is a negative Nancy, or are we excluding them? Who we are labeling as a negative Nancy, or are we excluding them, right? Work schedules to allow for flexibility. Awesome. Providing opportunities for training. Yeah. The way we hire, our hiring practices, seeking out quiet voices. I love that, Rob, because sometimes we don't pay attention to the folks that are more passive in our groups or our organizations. And it doesn't mean that they're not engaged. It doesn't mean that they're not excited about the work that's being done. It just might mean that that's just their style. So we need to engage all voices, even the loud ones. And we'll talk about passive resistors and passive folks that are on board or not when we're talking about change. But it's just really engaging everyone and not excluding them and labeling them. So it takes a lot of unconscious effort there. Anything else? How to work rapport with people more like ourselves. Yes. Awesome. So as I mentioned before, there's a lot that can be done about this type of topic of bias and inclusivity at work. But most of the tools and techniques we'll cover in this workshop will work to override these biases, right? If you consider everyone as an individual and you try to understand who they are and why they might be reacting a certain way, or what is somewhat of their experience that is causing them to act a certain way, right? So remember that no one style of leadership fits every person, but you're basing your style on your bias. So be sure that you're open to the situation and the person, okay? And keep in mind as we work through this for the next few days, all right? So I do wanna, we did cover a lot today. We have considered a lot today and things that will also affect all the areas of your work. So thinking about all that, if you can put in the chat one thing that I do want to spend more time doing or thinking about when I go back to work. I love that, Rob. Learn to read the Zoom room. Yeah, but that's also hard if people don't have their cameras on, right? So how do we read that Zoom room? So what is one thing you want to spend more time doing or thinking about when you go back to work? Being intentionally inclusive. Okay. Normalizing the work environment after the disruption of COVID. Yes. Oh, awesome. What situational leadership I need to be in. Be more intentional on connections, both at work and non-work related things. Yes. How to build rapport with other teams where we may not have been so intentional about connecting, how to deal with different tasks versus people. Yes. Actively reaching out to the quiet team members to make sure they feel supported, seen and supported. How are my unconscious biases affecting my decisions? Yes. This is great. I do want to say we do have a little homework for tomorrow. So if you can please complete understanding each other worksheet on page 17. This is for your personal reflection to prepare for tomorrow's session. It does not have to be handed in, but it's more for you to have had this thought process as we're covering tomorrow's topics. And then I am going to share my screen because I want to hear some conversations about getting some feedback, right? Let me share my screen real quick. So we have a happy face, sad face. So using your annotate tool, please give us feedback so far so that we can adjust if we need to. On the happy side, what things are working well and we should keep doing. On the sad side, what can we do better or make some adjustments for the rest of the course. This, I will turn off my video. You can use the annotate tool. If the annotate tool doesn't work for you, just put a note on the chat and we could put it on there. But please feel free to share some feedback with me on what's working and what's not. And I will turn off my video. Once you put your comment, you are free to go about the rest of your day. And then we will we will see each other tomorrow. All right. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.